Welcome everyone to Hidden Tech presents Amherst Media. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. It's so beautiful outside. I didn't know how many people would come inside, but we have quite a nice turnout here. I'd like to recognize John Reed. Can't see him, but there he is, president of Hidden Tech, and I am Claudia Gear, one of the board of directors. And I'm not sure who I'm introducing first.
I think you're going to introduce Jim.
Okay. I'd like to introduce Jim Lescault, who is the head of this organization, and he'll give us a rundown on what we're going to be doing tonight. Jim.
Thank you. Thank you, Claudia. So, welcome everybody. How many of you have not been in this building before? Wow, so that's about 3/4 of you. Well, welcome. I'm really glad you took the time to come in, and we're really proud of what we've accomplished, not in the recent, but also for 36 years we've been providing technological services to this media community, both in training and cable casting. But about 4.5 years ago, I was hired to come in and try to take the organization a step further and bring it up more into the current technological phase that we all are seeing every day grow. And one of the big obstacles when I came in was that we were still recording a lot onto VHS tape, only 4.5 years ago. So that was one of the first things of getting our cable signals to really be much more digital, to really get a better way of capturing what we're doing in audio and video. But with that also came a time to really look closely at our web presence, because we all know that that's where things are happening, right? Cable is nice, but more people, you probably in particular, have cut the cord a long time ago. So what we're doing here is really we took a look at what the national trends were, what other access and media centers had done, and we stepped up our game to say, okay, this is what we have to do to change. And what you're going to hear is some of the changes that were done. And one of the smartest moves I made was to reorganize people's job descriptions, because it was originally around production, right, and programming. We're still production and programming, but how do you do the media technology end? How do you incorporate the various social networking capacities, the different ways that you're going to connect your editors here, how you're saving, where you're storing, how are you archiving. So all those kind of wonderful things that we're all faced with, right, on a daily basis, we decided to really take a step forward and use this as not only as an example for small. We're considered one of the small range. We're not the smallest, but a small organization doing cable, doing media access. So how do you move into the bigger ability to do so much more? And what that means is that we're not just doing cable TV. We really are stretching, and you're about to hear some of the ways that we consider our users to be more than just video producers. And many of you, I think, are going to identify with what we're talking about with some of the groups that we've worked with. So here to make that presentation for us is Craig Sinclair, who I was lucky enough to meet when we reorganized and looking for a media technology coordinator, director, and since that time, Craig has really taken us into where we were hoping to go and still hoping to go in the future. So I turn the rest of the evening over, and then we're going to go to a Q&A. We're going to bring the lights up, and we really hope to get some dialogue going on what your needs are and how you see the valley and your needs beyond the valley. All right, so enjoy the show.
Thank you, Jim. Hello, everybody. I'm Craig Sinclair. I am going to try and take us through all of this, probably leaving out as much as I managed to put in, partly because it isn't just about me. It's not just Jim. We have several other wonderful staff here, and a variety of other people will weave into this narrative. This is about, I think Claudia and I talked about the idea of working collaboratively and collectively, whether we are in the same room together or in isolation. And that's one of the things that this organization has done in the past. When I started here, we were still called Amherst Community Television, and we are still a television station. That is the main thing that we do for a variety of reasons. But increasingly in the world of public access, there's been a move to recognize that that's not really truly representative of who we've been for some time. We've been doing more than television. We are a community media outlet, and community media is the most pre-reformed media in the US. It is founded on values of openness and advocacy by local municipalities. It's non-partisan, non-corporate. It covers without bias or editorialization, and it promotes free speech. It's in a world of mega mergers and advertorials. It is one of the virtues, I think, of the US media system, that across the country there are so many in this established network of media outlets. And in a way, community media is also social media before social media existed. All of the different networks there are don't necessarily promote the localism. So while you may have identities in all of these, and this slide is actually a couple of years out of date, so scarily enough, this is probably quadrupled in size by now, you don't necessarily know the other people on them that are around you, that are connected to you. And we like to aggregate between purely online experience and the offline experience. There's many ways one can be involved, whether it is traditional manner of making television or in some of the other things that I'll get on to share with you. So we are grassroots media made by the people for the people, and we wanted to embrace, as Jim said, the approach that a lot of stations have been doing that wish to go beyond the idea of television. That is, that there's more out there, we can get people involved. And yet, strangely for television stations, a lot of the history of these organizations is somewhat humble. They haven't wanted to show off, they haven't wanted to say, look at the great work we're doing. They've had it on television, but it's been confined to people that have cable in that area, are aware that it's on and happen to be watching at any given time. So putting it up online on our website was one start. Being networked with the wider community. This is a map of all of the community media and low power FM stations across Western and some of central Massachusetts. That's quite a lot of them. There is this established network out there, and each of them is going to be quite different because they're responsive to their community, they'll be governed and organized in different ways, but Massachusetts is the heartland of community media. And Amherst Media is lucky enough to share in this valley a lot of good work and relationships with Greenfield Community Television and Northampton Community Television. Al from Northampton is here and will be joining us, I hope, to answer some questions later on. One of the things we found is that I live in Northampton, I work in Amherst. The valley is a fluid place in this way. We don't stay in one town, we move around. Some of you here may be from the further reaches of Western Mass, that even us in Western Mass to the east somewhat don't regard as being part of the state, in the same way that Boston likes to forget that we exist. But we're part of a network of other local organizations, Montague Community Television, Falls Cable, others at the moment doing a lot of fantastic work. And there are many others involved in the things we do, which mainly feature three different strands of TV: public access, education, and government. And we do these things not out of taxpayer money, but out of a proportion of your local cable fees. So if you have cable TV, thanks, because you are funding us. Don't go cutting your cords. And we are essentially a no-pressure venue for people to do what they want. We don't have to be responsive to the suggestion that we must have more viewers each year, that we need to be the most popular kid in town. We are here for people to be enabled to realize their visions and their dreams. And often that takes the place of people making television shows. It could be something that happens as using this studio we're in now as a performance venue. It could be out and about in a town. We've covered the Rotary auction for several years here. We've been covering Ignite Amherst for 3 years now. We do all of the government meetings. Well, no, there are lots of government meetings in Amherst. We do quite a lot of the government meetings in Amherst. And the rest of them we leave for other people to cover. We would be happy to show them afterwards. We have a series of our own regular long-running shows, from conversations to encounters to student news, where we have local and international luminaries on. I was quite shocked when I walked out of my office one day to see Vandana Shiva walking down the corridor to leave the building, who's been one of my lifelong heroes, and I had not even known she would be here. Congressman Jim McGovern was just in the other week. Using this studio. In our smaller studio, you can see here Ish and Greg doing their No Slander podcast, which has been really successful on iTunes. We like to be responsive to what people throw at us and suggest. We also try and promote recording whatever it is possible so we can show it, and that's shown a massive increase in the amount of productions we have. Since 2008, there's been a 65% increase in member productions. which when people have all these opportunities to self-produce, to bypass community media because they have their own camera, they have their choice of video display online, that's maybe somewhat surprising. We've also, though, been recording more and more meetings as well, so it just shows that there's more happening perhaps, that people want to record it, they want to share. And we can share this from the margins. We can share it from the places where the interesting things are happening. Because we're not beholden to the culture of memery, we can avoid things like this. And I realized while making this today that hopefully a lot of you have already forgotten who this lady Rebecca Black is, because was this maybe April of last year? She had something like 10 million views on YouTube. But do we remember who she is? No, that we have people that are famous for a brief fleeting moment and move on. We're here to provide a record of communities and what they do over a longer period of time. Our archive room we're currently digitizing right now, and we have meetings going back through the full 35 years of our existence. So this is our essential premise, to connect people together, to give them the tools to do what they want, and then act as a curator, a place that's a kind of a local node on the regional, county and statewide network of public media like NPR and PBS. And we also want to be an important part of the community. I know a lot of you in Hidden Tech will probably feel more palpably than many the need to have high-speed internet access to homes and businesses throughout the region. In the 91 corridor, we're quite spoiled for choice, but as soon as you travel west from here, it gets rather difficult. One of the things that community media centres have been advocating for across the region is to become the anchor institutions, either officially or unofficially, that help support this, because often it's the community media centre that's already doing a lot of this work, that's already been involved and understands and has the staffing capacity and capability to know what networking involves. They will already have been an anchor institution, they perhaps just have not told everybody else about that, and now is the opportunity to do it. And this kind of connection to the other parts of our community is something we do working with policy advocates like Free Press in Northampton about net neutrality, working with the local government to make sure that they have the ability to broadcast the things they need to do for the citizenry, and what I like to call, it's a nonsensical word, broadcasting, which is we're essentially narrowcasters on television. We can only show to our local community, but by having the ability to put things up online as well, we can broadcast beyond our shores so that people here can show it to their friends and family elsewhere, and other people can stumble across it. We tend to get cult followings in the most unusual and unexpected countries for particular shows. It would be fascinating someday to work out who these particular return viewers are. But we want to make sure that even in a sleepy town like Amherst, we are aware of and responsive to the technological needs. And part of that is knowing that Amherst isn't a sleepy town. Comcast actually tests out a lot of their high-end technologies here, because it turns out that the 5 college students living off campus have a propensity for stretching and testing the extent of the ability to download things on a regular basis. This sees a frequent spike in traffic here, so this is actually the testing ground for a lot of the new ways they're going to approach how it's possible for future customers to get the service they want. And that's really how we want to see ourselves. That we're a place where we can help test and prove concepts so that they can then go on to be shared and developed elsewhere, as well as helping us out in the kind of symbiotic relationship that is truly community, and in this case often involved in the media. So, what are the things that we do? One of those is just as we're here at the moment. This is a fantastic venue for people getting together. We have meetings here, we have gatherings for groups of various kinds, from non-profits to local community organizations. We have Video Vanguard's local youth group in here. The South Amherst Campus School comes in regularly. We have producers that use the facility to make TV, but we also have people that just use this as a meeting space. And if you are looking for somewhere to meet, perhaps we should talk about that. We also, in this very studio, a couple of times last year with a local IT company I'll get onto later, had a couple of amazing LAN parties. For those of you that may not be gamers that stay awake for 36 hours at a time, that's what it is, gaming for a very long time, and it requires one to have a particularly sophisticated network so that you can keep these people using the most expensive and often homemade machines one can imagine, all working nicely at the same time. And we got glowing endorsements for one of them whose dad happens to be high up in Microsoft. And then it's the idea that really a lot of the people that come here are basically entrepreneurs. There are various notables who go on through the route of community media to production of all kinds, but really it doesn't have to be just by making television, though it's a good way to start out how one thinks about it. So in the last year that we have the records for fully, we calculated based on the fair market value of using our equipment, be it cameras or edit suites, that we had given $684,500 back to the community in that 1 year. And that pretty much has been an upward trend and has been hovering from the time I started here above, I think, 550,000. That's a tremendous amount of value just to serve in this way, and that's not including any of the use of the facility by staff at that point. We have computer labs set up, and as somebody that has tried vainly to edit on my home computer, I understand that people need sometimes a computer that is set up specifically to do a certain task rather than being loaded down with 400 applications, millions of MP3s, and all of the other detritus that we gradually build up. So our computer labs are for use for editing of all kinds. We have Final Cut 7 and Final Cut 10 on them, the latest versions of Photoshop and Illustrator on many of them. And we're here for people to drop in and use them, but also for trainings. Last year, we became the only Apple authorized training center in Western Massachusetts. And since then, we've been offering classes in Final Cut 7 and Final Cut 10. And have grown to love, I have to say, Final Cut 10, despite the naysayers. One of the things I'd like to be able to share with people is actually, once you get past the bad press that happened and the bad PR at the time, Final Cut 10 is rather a nifty little piece of software, particularly if you haven't edited before, because it will help you understand how editing works a lot more quickly. And that's something I got from taking the Apple class here myself. I encourage you to come along. We'll be starting a community class in April for Final Cut 10, so you can experience this. We also have the ex-director of digital imaging at Hallmark Institute in Turners Falls teaching our Photoshop workshops on a regular basis, and we offer HD camera training. But we want you to challenge us. If there is something that you want to see here, please let us know. We started the Apple authorization largely because we wanted to give something back at a different level from our community workshops, but also because we are not beholden in the same way to corporate interests. So the workshops we offer here are the same as those in Boston and New York, but it's actually cheaper to do it here, travel here, get a hotel for the 3 nights, and eat out all the time. That seems like quite a good deal to me. We hope people will take us up on it. And we like training people so much that we also have many interns. These are not even all of our interns for this semester, I realized, in cramming them onto the screen. We average about 30 interns a semester from the 5 colleges. So we like to train them in as much as we can, from the media aspects and how to collaborate and organize, but also how to go out and find things for themselves. But we learn from them too. We would not be doing many things that we are now. Indeed, I would not be sitting here if one of our interns hadn't suggested to Jim that we look into this Drupal initiative and maybe think about revamping our website. So we realize that this is not a relationship where we necessarily have all the answers. We want people to go out and find them. So over the last year, we've had a citizen journalism initiative led at the start by a woman, Ali Pinchmit, who now teaches at Clark University. And we wanted to think about what it is in Amherst that people didn't necessarily cover for news, that wasn't in any of the other local news outlets. We trained people how to use smaller cameras, to use their phones, to cover information that was maybe not getting represented anywhere, whether it was for our television or whether it was something we were going to put online. We wanted to then also work with the idea of Drupal so that we could change our website and make it something that was more interactive. For those of you that don't know, Drupal is an open source content management system. It's one of the 3 most popular ones there are, and we have subsequently had a lot of the local Drupal meetups here. We were the co-sponsors of the first Western Mass Drupal camp at UMass. They just had the second one this year. There's a really big valley-wide network of Drupalites or Drupalistas, if you will. And we did this for something that was at that point called the Open Media Project. And that's when we found out about beta testing. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever volunteered or been subjected to the world of beta testing, but it isn't necessarily a world that always works out and is full of joy. There are pitfalls involved. That's one of the reasons that somebody is letting you try out their fancy new thing for free. The Open Media Project has now metamorphosized into the community media modules, and I'm currently working on the Drupal 7 version of that, which will be launching sometime in the coming months, and writing documentation and screencasts so we can be part of this nationwide network of community media centers who have this software that allows them to run their station through their website and allows their members to reserve equipment and promote their films and find other people to connect with and collaborate on their projects. And in thinking about this idea of collaboration and beta testing and deciding that we wanted to go through the ringer with as many different projects as possible, we started looking around to see what else people were doing. The 5 colleges are here, Hidden Techers are here. There's all of these people doing things that we don't necessarily find out about or that don't necessarily get launched because they need a proving ground. They need someone to say, yes, I will test this out, and the benefit of it will be partly in our testing, but also in the case of Localocracy, it was something that we would be able to use for people to comment on our government meetings. We show the meetings in their entirety, whether they're 30 minutes or 4.5 hours long. We do not edit them in any way. We want people to be able to feed back to it, so we ran Localocracy as an RSS feed on our screen so people could then interact live and comment on what was happening in the meeting, whether it was to say they agreed, disagreed, they had other information about the points being discussed. And we were the first people to really use this with them. It was made by 2 UMass, I think they were juniors when they started it, seniors when they finished it, grads now, and they made it on Ruby on Rails, open source development. They needed someone to test it out. They subsequently expanded throughout Massachusetts, and then they got bought up by an extravagant amount of money by the Huffington Post last year. So we like to think that we helped contribute a lot with the early development of the project. Similarly, Ground Crew, which was based in Northampton at the time, we started using for our citizen journalists as a way to coordinate the squad that we were sending out so we could help them with some of the bugs. They are now in San Francisco and being very successful using their knowledge to help out with a lot of location-based efforts, including helping out in a lot of the relief efforts in the Gulf last year after the BP spill. mCrowd at UMass was an initiative started by the biology and one of the IT departments, and it's to do with getting the crowd to help out with information. They initially used it so they could track invasive beetle populations across Massachusetts. We were going to use it for our student journalist initiative. However, we didn't have enough money to provide them all with iPhones. So this is one of the aspects that we realize that partnerships are not always necessarily going to be perfect, but we're continuing to work with them on their future developments. In Northampton again, the JSeed project was a way to allow content sharing and aggregation between news sites so that hopefully all of the community media stations could share their news which would be relevant across geographic boundaries, but also the local papers, the local radio stations, the local TV affiliates. All of us would be able to put up into a region-wide tracker the ability to share this code independent of the different website platforms they were using, because this would work across Drupal and WordPress, and maybe on Joomla too. So we wanted to help people out with their technological initiatives and give them the chance to prove that they worked. And these ones were all the nice stepping stones. At that point, we got a much bigger project, which was one Dan Tucker, who is in the audience this evening, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Zana IT, phoned me up one day because I'd been talking with a friend of his about the idea that we would have some sort of way to replace our external hard drives. We wanted to go tapeless. Jim said that 4.5 years ago we were still using VHS. The interval is the mini DV tape. We now were buying new cameras that were going to be high definition, that would use SD cards. We wouldn't need tapes anymore, and we wouldn't need the clutter of different external hard drives acquired over the years that each required a different adapter, that each had a different power supply, that each had the potential for suddenly breaking and disappearing. So we wanted to bring order and chaos to everything, and we wanted to do this because we don't have the budget to go out and buy the existing solutions for this, which often for our needs would start about $80,000 to $120,000. That would be lovely if we had maybe quadruple our budget, and even then I don't think our board of directors would have gone for it. So we wanted to help them make something that they could then take elsewhere and would be usable elsewhere that would work for us. We wanted to have something that was essentially a giant hard drive that all of our users could use to edit on as their scratch disks, which is a fantastically difficult thing to set up, and why this magical device didn't really exist at this point. And it had to be something that was incredibly affordable, sustainable, that any of the staff and members in here could use, whether they're a producer or an admin. And it had to be open source, but worked with Macs and possibly PCs too. And then we considered that, what if the internet went down? Could it still be accessed? What if there was a power cut? How would we have the storage for it? What would we be looking for? And there's an expression in English that conveys this, which is that we were looking for the moon on the stick. And this image here, don't be fooled, this is not some careless person actually balancing the moon on the stick. I believe it's camera trickery where they're holding a small stick in front of it. I wasn't sure when I first saw it, but the concerns I laid out was something that we realized there was a way to work with, and it was doing something that we'd already been doing with Drupal and with the other initiatives I talked about, which is working with open source. It was a way that we could give back because we would not be copywriting anything. It's a way we could work with existing resources, and it had a lot of commonalities with the sort of essence of what community media is as well. And we realized that we're actually using a lot of that here. One of the things we do as sort of micro workshops is teach people how to use technology they can actually afford at home. If you have open source things, there may be other issues with it, but it's helping people learn it, and it does seem to be the way that people get involved in open source, is that it sweeps them off and takes them to other things. They want then to also share what they've been making with Creative Commons licensing. The idea that you know that when you've made this thing, it doesn't have particular copyright, it can be passed on to other people given certain requirements. This is Creative Commons water. You may have that in your faucet at home. You may need to go and check later on. But the idea of Creative Commons is that it's something that allows you to know exactly where you stand on everything. And this is a kind of philosophical and metaphorical principle for how we wanted to operate. We don't want to take other people's ideas. We don't want to give out our own. We wish to be in this loop of sharing. And I went to a meeting of people in the Valley working on the idea of the Commons, and discovered that there were things such as open source and Creative Commons origami. this is really something that can be expanded in many ways to think about how people partner and how they contribute back to this community and the greater technological one. So in working with Zana, we realized that we were also working with producers. They were going to make something for us, and they would be community technologists. They would be considering that the lines between media and technology are ever shifting, basically making something that was essentially a TV show. Except in this case, and spookily enough, right where we are sitting at the moment, they were making an open source edit server that would do all the things that we needed it to do, that would also be transportable so that people elsewhere could do it, and if they were able to watch this video in slow-mo, just copy along at home with a few things they had lying around in their basement probably too. We wanted basically to work with the interested people, the savvy people, the ones that were out there that were looking to do something that was experimental, that they didn't have the venue for otherwise, they didn't have the options and opportunities, because we could help with the creation, the distribution, the facilitation of it to prove that this would work. And it now has been for the last year, and we don't need external hard drives anymore. We have this magical device in the back room. Zana have been selling it and have been working with other community media centers around the US, helping them with other projects, because not everybody has the same need, the same visions in the first place. We've been putting things together and working out how they can help other people, and also working out what it is that they can do to help us. Your donations this evening went towards, whether you knew this or not at the time, the fund to facilitate our search for new facilities. We may not be very much longer for this building, which is a bittersweet thing to think about because we're getting rather used to it and its many quirks and charms. But we want to know from you what it is that we can do for you, what it is then we should be looking for, where it is we might move. If you have offers, we're willing to listen this evening as well, because we are basically representatives of you. This is happening in Amherst as it is throughout the valley, because this is an area that has so much creativity, so much potential, so many resources all working together. So we want to recognize and thank you for the part you play in this, while also offering you the opportunity to expand and extend what it is you're doing with us in the future. Thank you.
Would you pass that around for people that want to ask questions or
Questions?
comments?
First of all, thank you. Wonderful presentation. Oh, okay, that too. You mentioned a couple of things at the outset. One is that you're funded by way of cable systems, and then alluded to the cable cutters who are increasing in number. The second thing is that you are chartered by the community of Amherst, and yet the presence on the web also extends your reach far beyond what Amherst does.
Right.
Has that caused problems from anyone in the food chain as far as your mission, your service area, and your funding?
I think the simple answer to that is no. I may be not aware of any others, and there are people to speak to this. That's a complicated issue nationwide for community media. I think the most important thing to think about with that is the legislation that's happened in the past, which has meant that our funding is tied solely to cable television, when the various companies that provide cable often at that point were providing Ethernet or dial-up internet, and often said that was not going to be used for video, and this may just have happened to be a particularly bad time when these things went together. If it had been a year later, it would have been quite clear that it was, and a lot of the companies that provide cable television often now have their own online video service of some kind, or partner with or co-own some other organization that does. If you look at the proposed NBC-Comcast merger of last year, it was amazing to consider just how much of the US media landscape one singular corporation would have owned. And that would not have meant that all of the community media centres and other similar non-profits really benefited anymore. It just means we have to keep up. In our case, our catchment area, though, is not just Amherst. It is also Pelham, Leverett and Shutesbury. Pelham does get cable television, Leverett and Shutesbury don't. Amherst includes UMass, Hampshire and Amherst College, all of which have charter cable. So we can only really reach a small proportion of the people that are in this area by television. And in order to provide all of them with access to information, we feel it's important that we get all of the local productions up online, particularly when we don't show a government meeting live. We get calls from people in the hill towns on a regular basis saying, we need to see this, because often it won't be something that's pertinent even a few days later on. So it's a tricky situation, but I think that if we don't do this and we don't also try and increase the different revenue streams we have, then it's not going to be as happy a future as it might be. And there are centres that are resolute in saying, no, we're just television. But I think that the idea of television and a visual image is changing. When I can plug a USB stick or my phone into this and watch something on a television, when one's computer's plugged into it, it's not the same as the idea of cable we had even 5 or 6 years ago.
I agree, it's an excellent presentation, just really informative. So I'm going to throw you a curveball.
Okay.
Wasn't covered. I think probably the blizzard of 2011 happened on Halloween,
Mm-hmm.
and if you went up and down College Street, you couldn't get a cup of coffee. And I'm not saying you should go into coffee, but I guess my question is, what is the role for community television when the most snow we get is on Halloween, and you know, we're starting summer before spring begins, and weather emergency, that kind of thing? Because Western Mass took it really on the chin last October, and honestly, the infrastructure was not there.
No. And that I know from people, even for WFCR, WAMC, a lot of people lost power. One of the things we had difficulty with is that none of the current staff actually live in Amherst. So none of us knew whether it was safe to come here necessarily, because we all lost our power and facilities. And when I did check in, everything was still running here. But we are not connected directly to Amherst government at that point. And we've worked with them in the past when there was the E. coli scare to be able to provide press coverage from the Amherst police station. But basically we have to be responsive to them for being set up to do that, and then we can relay it afterwards. And we're looking to do that as much as we can as a venue for it. For terms of the television part of it though, it's often our website would be unaffected because of the power outage if it's localized, so we would be able to keep up-to-date news on there, assuming we can get it in the first place. So it's really at that point the people sending information to us so that we know it, so we can distribute it. And if you have any ideas or know anybody in the government you'd like to speak to, we'd very like to talk to you about that.
I'll go again. Just a footnote to that. I live in Central Mass, and so even though we get 16 inches of snow, our big outage was the ice storm in 2008.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating to have the local AM station be the go-to place. Normally they just feed syndicated news, but they still had enough of a core news staff and a generator running at their tower, and so the guys just parked there and stayed there for 36 hours until they were able to get through the worst of the crisis. You mentioned you had a map of Mass 123, mm-hmm. and talking about service to the towns that currently do not have any access to high-speed internet. The Mass Broadband is building some very, very fat pipes, way beyond what the current capacity is going to call for. Can you speculate on how that's going to change things, overall, when in effect, bandwidth becomes a non-issue? I mean, you've already talked about storage becoming a non-issue with some clever solutions. Now, by springing lots of fiber to all communities, what is going to happen when bandwidth becomes essentially free?
And for the regard of community media, or just a general global situation here? Wow. People, I guess, spend a lot of time on the internet. I know personally, for me, when we got broadband internet for the first time, I started listening to a lot of the BBC shows, because the BBC is very forward-thinking about this, and they have all of their radio streaming throughout the week, so you could listen to things even when you weren't listening to it live. I think that people will go and discover and find out what they can. For us, we've had incredibly high-speed bandwidth, luckily, since the start, really. We've been part of the town's network, and we use it for uploading shows as quickly as possible and sending things to archive.org so we can keep everything there. I think for community media, what it will mean is that people have a reason to create digital archives and share them with each other. And we are using that so we can have a kind of national file serving network. There are several different initiatives in community media to do that. But I think oftentimes people don't take part because their centers don't have the bandwidth capacity. We did a study last summer of this, and it really varies incredibly from people having dial-up still to sharing dial-up to having the connection to the Springfield sort of public network. So it's just ridiculously fast. But I think that it will mean that we get to see the full archives of what's happening. And if you could have a searchable database of every government meeting in Amherst, that would be an incredibly useful repository for checking on how this all works.
Can I just make a comment about that? Mass Broadband Institute's been here to speak. When I'm on the board of Mass Access, which represents about 150 access and media centers across the state of Massachusetts, and there's over 200. So we're one of the highest concentrated states of these kind of facilities. But Broadband Institute's just called, and they want to come back and start producing out of here to try to get the information out. You made a comment about broadband becoming free or inexpensive. I don't see that happening. Matter of fact, I see it as a real problem, whereas at least in cable, people always badmouth cable, but cable came into any community. It had a universality. You had to service everyone. You couldn't cherry pick. You couldn't say, that's a expensive part of town that's going to buy my product. These are poor people. You had to make it available to everyone. That's not necessarily the case. It's up to each town on the receiving end of this to do that. And we want to promote that everyone should have that access, right? Everyone, whether it be through the anchors being a library or being a center like this or wherever people can go, that expense for a low-income house is huge. It's just huge. It's not going to be free. And my belief, it should be free. We gave it away as a federal government. I think we really lost that. And I know Al will speak a little bit later about the Alliance for Community Media, trying to deal with the FCC on these issues and saying, like, cable used to be a coaxial, and now you say, well, okay, your question was, well, cable, you're supposed to be doing this. Why are you on the internet? Well, they are. They've crossed the line so much, your phones and everything else, right? So we're really trying to get to the bottom of that in the local, and then the regional, and then national, to really promote the fact that broadband should be a right. It shouldn't be just for the privilege, quite honestly. And I think we're missing that. I don't hear that dialogue out there much. So I don't want to take the floor. I'm really here to listen to you, but later I want to hear more about what you think our new facility should have that's going to help this community, your community, and other people that you know. There's a question over here, all right? Whoa, not the floor.
Yes, Craig. I was talking to Morris here earlier, and I think he was telling me that the second most watched thing on the web is YouTube after Google.
Used for search.
Well, for search,
Yeah.
okay. Have you done anything, I'm sure you have, but can you give us some specifics? Every nonprofit in town needs to have a video on YouTube about them that you can click to from their homepage. Have you been doing much about that, and do you see that as being something significant to do in service of the community?
We run various trainings for nonprofits to help them create PSAs, but I think that that's a very valuable thing, that everybody should have that, and that it's exactly the sort of initiative that we have just encouraged with our trainings, and we have nonprofit membership that includes a training and sort of a consultation for how to make that video. The way that Google search now works as well, because Google and YouTube are basically the same, there is a way to make sure that the search engine and the video site kind of drive each other to become even more and more popular. So I think that having something up, as your identity is incredibly important. And it's the same though, where with even asking about us having a website, a lot of organizations did not think that having a website, being on Twitter, having email, having Facebook, there's the sort of the incremental shifts of understanding of whether something is important. I think that is the next one. From people I've talked to, they're sometimes concerned that they won't necessarily have anybody watch it. And if they have no one watching it, that will be the reason for not having it up there. But no, I think that it's really important, and we will be running more video workshops for that. And would you be doing this yourself?
Well, I might, but
Okay.
but I just know that there's many nonprofits that need to move into having the experience, not just be a website, but be a video.
No, and it's actually, it's quite amazing how many nonprofits there are in Amherst. I think one of the problems is the one that a lot of the community media centres around here have too, is that we all have such tiny staffs and such tiny budgets that it's the thing that always gets pushed off till the next month.
Well, it's a great thing for interns to do. It's an excellent
Exactly.
intern activity.
Yes, and we do have various people that have come in here and been the appointed intern that someone has said on their first day, okay, you can go and get trained, because we have, all nonprofits get a free training on either our cameras or editing, and so they send someone along to learn it. But then the unfortunate thing about that is interns tend to also move on to other internships and maybe even jobs sometimes as well.
Well, let me ask. I'd like to follow up on what Terry was just talking about. I have a one-day workshop that I do, and I love this set. I mean, this is just beautiful. I can see myself up there with the slides showing on the TV in the background. What would I do?
Testing. You might be low on battery. Could you just move towards the front a little more? Because of course, might pick you up too.
Sure. Love the set, and I have a one-day workshop that I do, and I could see myself sitting there showing the slides, the audience filled, clapping, and this would become a product for me.
Right.
So how do I fit into this?
So you raise one of the kind of the few complexities here, which is that in access there tend to be barriers at certain points, and a lot of what we've been doing is trying to remove them. The voluminous house rules that existed here, which have now been boiled down to virtually nothing. But when anybody comes in here to use the facilities, because we and most community media centres do sort of provide things basically for free or at a loss, the thing we need back is something that we can show. So if people are willing to show whatever it is they're making, which means often at some point revealing things that they may have otherwise copyrighted, then as long as it plays on our channels, it makes it much easier to do it. For something to be in here, as you can see, we have 3 cameras. We need to set up the lights, the sound. It depends how many people have sat up the front, the orientation of it, the type of curtains, and we need people to run all of it as well. So the Rotarians, when they wanted to do it, they trained about 15 of their members so they could all take part, and they also pay the staff to be here to run the boards because it's a huge, I think it's 20-hour long shoot they do. But if you want to be involved and do this, then you can propose a show, and if you have basically the desire and the initiative, then you will be making a show. It's as simple as that.
Excellent. Other questions?
throw
Oh.
something out then.
There's one more, I think. There. I'm not sure if that is even going to work.
Are you still hearing?
Does work.
Does.
Okay.
This may have already been addressed, and I apologize if I didn't understand the vernacular. You referred to the catchment area, including Shutesbury, which doesn't have cable and
Right.
not much dial-up. I mean, not much, yeah, a lot of dial-up. Let me put it that way. Got it backwards there. My question is, since I do not pay for cable, I am not an Amherst resident, would I be able to come down and take a class here?
Yes. The way we have currently worked it out, that basically we have some members that turn up here from upstate New York. One of our members, I think, lives most of the year in Columbia. If you are interested in coming here and you are able to be in Amherst, a membership is now, I believe, $25 a year. And our classes start at $25 for the community editing workshop and the community camera workshop, which are 1 evening, 3-hour classes. And then at that point, the Photoshop classes are slightly cheaper. They range from about $50 to $150. And the Apple trainings are then $800 instead of $1,000 for a 3-day class. We're also teaching the what's Apple's phrase for it? Their older products that they've forgotten exist anymore is the best way to do it. Final Cut 7, did we make that? Oh, but we still think it's rather good. So we do 2-day trainings on that, which are basically a shortened version of their original 3-day trainings. You can no longer get certification at the end of it, but it's always been to me, and a lot of the people who have taken it, more important that they know things in detail. And I think that that's the case as well. I know, Al, do you let people from all over the valley come to Northampton?
Yep.
We just recognize that sometimes it's easier to be at one centre than another, and there's some trainings that Northampton does that we don't, and we recommend people go to them. There's some that happen in surprising places. It's really kind of sharing the resources around as best we can all manage.
I spent a lot of time obsessing with digital media. I have a sort of passion for creating content, but I'm also fascinated by how difficult it becomes to charge for creative content in the new economy. And digital media kind of, almost by definition, is much friendlier towards free content, whether it's a Creative Commons license or what have you. It tends to distribute faster and get more attention, but it does create dilemmas for the creator, especially when you talk about more complex projects with video that are resource intensive and what have you. So I'm wondering, I'm sure you've interacted with a lot of groups and organizations and individuals who have created content and gone out into the world with it, and what kinds of lessons and trends are you seeing around the best ways to balance the idea to get the word out about what you do and what you care about versus the fact that you do need to find a way to fund these products as well?
That's a really individual perspective. Some of our producers definitely believe that they are about to be discovered by their YouTube channel and be flown off in a fancy jet and be given unlimited resources. I think the people that have been most successful in terms of getting noticed have been very successful in distributing it to everyone. 2 of our members, though, last year made a video that won the Northeast Award for Best Music Performance, which was their mashup between the Beastie Boys and Dr. Seuss's Snitches story, which remains one of the finest things I've seen in any medium over the last few years, and I think it's languishing about 8,000 views on YouTube. And it's really sort of sad and frustrating. I know I get sent all of these, like, how can I make my video viral? Watch this quick video to tell you guys. But I think knowing someone that works for YouTube is probably quite useful for that. It does, being randomly chosen, but I do think that what we teach is the basic skills, and the things people make here are often the ways that they get to learn the equipment. They get to learn how the editing is an art as well as just, oh, I know what this button does to do this thing. And it has been in the past the case that people have made things and said, oh, but I've got either copyrighted music which you can't show, or I'm not sure I want to put this out now, even though I've spent 400 hours making it here, so they will put it somewhere else and not tell us. But I found that it's kind of, as you say, almost the good faith part of it. If you make something Creative Commons and people increasingly understand that more and more, then it promotes the idea that someone will share it. And so on all of our edit stations, we have links to searches for Creative Commons images and music to add to their videos. And we've explained to people about it. I do think some of our members don't fully grasp it, but the idea that yes, more people might see it and then also be able to distribute it, because I don't know if any of you have spent much time reading the end user licensing agreements on YouTube or Vimeo or Blip. Really, if we were to play a YouTube video in here, there was content that had been uploaded without the permission in the first place, that would be illegal. But to distribute it to this many people here as well, that might also be illegal. It's the kind of thing that people aren't busted for, but perhaps we should all go around citizen arresting everybody for illicitly watching things on YouTube, and that would help out with the balancing of it. But I think basically we try and suggest to people that making it is one part, promoting it is another, and that sometimes those two skills are separate. And we have been with the interns in particular trying to sort of encourage them that once they've done something, they might wish to share it so people know, because it becomes part of your kind of online Uber resume at that point.
Marketing is hard. Marketing is difficult.
Right. I mean, the most watched film we have of the last couple of years was one of the Ignite talks. That year they were all called Making Something. This one was about Bitcoin and it was called Making Money. That probably has had as many views as all of our other shows from that year online cumulatively. Is it because it's called Making Money? That might be why. Calling your video the right thing is probably the best lesson you can learn. And if it happens to be about something that is, yes, what the public wants to see, that's going to help you out too.
Just one more question. Well, before you ask that question, let me ask you one question. As we move forward in looking at our facility search, and we are looking at a couple properties right now in town, and it was written up, and one's an old school, it's more vertical, it's boxier. So it's a whole workflow issue for us, and looking at feasibility of what needs to be in place for us and the cost. But there's also, I've been talking about incubating, and you heard a little bit from Craig how we incubate when there's a product, whether it be a software or hardware, whether it's an idea that needs to just come in and be, talked out and worked out with other people. Do you see that as something, and the people you know and yourselves included, as something that is missing from the Amherst area? Is it something that you hear people asking for? I wish I could go somewhere that had the broadband I need, that has a workstation that I can go in, or maybe beta test. Does this resonate with any of you or people you know? Could you get the microphone over if there's a comment? Thank you. And Craig, you can handle it.
Part of it is the technical aspect, but I think part of it is also finding a place where people are doing that. So the incubation is not just transfer of technical skills, not just transfer of what buttons to push or the how to set up a shoot. It's talking about people so you get ideas germinating, so you can understand about markets, you can understand about what are the needs, so you're getting input as well as kicking around your own ideas. And I think that, as much as anything, fosters the kind of incubation and percolation that I think you're looking for. So it's both a functional area and a community place. Now that we're seeing a lot of virtual community spaces coming up, and that may be a possibility too. We look at something like Google Hangouts, where you can have ad hoc gatherings of people to talk about things without being physically located in one place, but still there's that center of gravity that comes from a place where a lot of smart people want to go.
I think if I could, then at this point, I'd like to introduce Dan Tucker, who is, what is your title, Dan?
President.
President. That's good. grab the microphone.
Okay.
You've gone past all of the Republican and Democratic primaries and pointed yourself already. What was it that made you feel that it was in any way worthwhile working with us here?
Oh, for one, you guys are actually quite fun.
And to say they just made the edit server, they also re-networked the building. We have an open source Wi-Fi and router setup at the moment too, and you've developed your own operating system
Yeah,
for
we
the
now have our
server
own
now.
OS.
That was a rather substantial undertaking, and I'm not sure that any of us realized how much, and ironically, before asking them to do this, I've been trying to use Xsan, Apple's product, to work with Final Cut 7. It didn't, they got rid of it, and then with Final Cut 10, it's the thing that works as standard. So if that had happened earlier on, it would have changed everything. It's sort of, you can never really guess with technology which way, and when you don't have money or time, and you have, say, a board of directors that's immensely skeptical about it, it's tricky. But has this helped you out?
Well, thanks for the Amherst Media. We're developing a whole bunch of new stuff. We developed our own routers, which are equivalent to $10,000 Cisco technology, and we can sell them for under $1,000. And Amherst Media, thankfully, gave us our first generation. We're on our second generation now, and I'm actually personally using it at my house. Now, I'm guessing most of you guys have, 15 megabit download speeds at your houses or most of your companies? Our router got me 90 at my house.
Thing is a microbit. 'Cause I get the feeling.
Warp shoots right.
Yes.
Well, our routers are capable of actually combining multiple WAN connections into one LAN network. So you can have a Comcast and Charter account and make that one internet connection at your place. Anything you got. It doesn't matter who it is or what it is, our router can do it. And if you have fiber, well, we could probably do that too, with enough money, because fiber is just so expensive nowadays.
Possibilities.
Infinite. We just keep accelerating technology. We're started at 2 terabyte hard drives here at Amherst Media. We're now using 3 terabyte as a standard. Our system is now more upgradable. You can actually start 3 terabytes and by yourself upgrade to 60 if you guys want to. It's your choice.
So yeah, you were talking about this as being just the sort of another home system. If you have lots of media on your computer is something you want to use separately from when you're watching something on a screen of some kind, then you could buy this kind of setup for it. You don't have to use it for having 18 different edit computers running off it at the same time. But we've checked to make sure that works, so it should hopefully work when it's just connected to your TV.
And also thanks to Amherst Media, we developed true cloud technology. Unfortunately, Mac and their operating system doesn't like us or anything like this at all. Since they're so close to us, Windows and Linux we have no problem with. You can literally redo your office and be green at the same exact time. Our new computers, 3 watts of power. And you can have almost infinite power and when it comes to graphics and CPU power. What we do is we can get you smaller computers that are pretty much just an Atom processor in there with a massive server which provides each little computer, CPU, and GPU power evenly distributed. Or if you guys really want to go some heavy core gaming, you can just put all that to one little unit. Graphics are kept, processing power is kept, and with using RAID technology, especially here at Amherst Media, if a hard drive fails, you still have all your data. With new clouding and true cloud technology, we can easily have different servers share any content.
Yeah, that was one of the things that we were most concerned about, that we hadn't had a hard drive crash in 2.5 years, and it seemed like that may have been tempting fate. So having backup, and the president of our board of directors, John Bruner, works in the multimedia department at Hampshire College, and at this point, one of his sort of star students lost their entire project because of a RAID failure. So we really wanted to make sure we have it triple backed up. So there's even another layer on top of that, which we haven't had to do anything with at the moment, but we shall wait and see, and it should hopefully be.
And thanks to the hardware we pick out, our hard drives, our 3 terabyte ones, have 5-year warranties. If they fail, you can get replaced. You won't lose any data.
Fantastic.
Our servers automatically redo everything by itself. And now that we have really nice remote technology built into all of our products, we have a problem, or you guys have a problem, whatever, something needs to be fixed, we can just remote into anywhere in the world and literally reinstall the operating system. If we can log right into the BIOS of the server, fix anything you guys need, anywhere.
So if you want to have a look in our server room, I'm sure Dan will gladly show you around the pride and joy that we have in there at the moment, and you can perhaps get the much newer version. I think if, does anybody have any questions about this?
So you have the RAID array backed up on the drives, but the cloud too, so is that another remote backup? What's the cloud?
The cloud system we have installed does allow users to, with the second generation, not their generation yet, allows users to actually submit video data to either a public directory or a user directory they already have. Our newer version of that is actually include apps, which are hopefully going to have in the next 6-7 months. Very hard to develop an app like this, which allow users to be at home on their phone, wherever in the field, upload that video content right from their phone to the server. At home, they can import a video from Amherst Media's cameras and then upload it right to their server. You don't have to be here. And based on your bandwidth connections and technology improving as it is, you might actually be able to edit that content at home.
And that's a good point as well. There are, while everybody sort of feels the video is going to the online world and on computers, that's not necessarily actually the national trend. People are not always, depending on which research you read, people are not cutting their cables. There are lots of people around here that really want to see their show on television and watch it, and we have people that if their show is not on, either the one they've made or the one that they watch, they will be very angry and phone us up. They do not want to watch it on any other screen. The TV is important, and it will be for some time. And it was in thinking about this we put it all together. But I should also introduce Mr. Al Williams, the Executive Director of Northampton Community Television. It was in speaking to Al that, please give him the mic, yeah. In speaking to Al that I thought about the cloud, because I told him about all the ground backup things, and he said, what about cloud backup? And then I thought, wow, that's a lot of terabytes. That's going to be very expensive. We'll probably wait for that for a while. But he has also been doing many things in Northampton, maybe you share, and also are we allowed to talk about the
Sure.
ACM?
Sure.
Can you make an exclusive announcement about that here?
Well, I also serve on the board of the National Board of Alliance for Community Media, which, as Jim mentioned, he's on Mass Access, which is the statewide network for 150 centers across Massachusetts. The Alliance, that's a chapter of the Alliance for Community Media, which is the national organization. We have about 1,000 members. So some of those are access centers, some of those are vendors. Very few, unfortunately, are vendors, but and we have some that are just individual memberships. So we face issues across the country. When Craig mentions Massachusetts is sort of, I don't know the term you use, but it's the heartland possibly of community media. He's not kidding. We've seen probably close to 20 states lose most of their community media institutions. California's lost 50 stations in the last 4 years. So it's a very interesting time in community media because there's all of this sort of shift in technological language and sort of the rules on the ground. And because everyone operates within their own communities very uniquely, there are a lot of challenges. Okay, so our goal really, I assume this is Amherst's goal, I'm pretty sure it is, and Northampton's goal is really to shift with that technology and to respond to the needs in the community because we have to reinvent ourselves. And all of us in this room are constantly dealing with that fact. The national organization, I think this is the announcement you're talking about, but we are currently revisioning the entire structure of the Alliance for Community Media. You have to, and I happen to be chairing that effort. So we are, this concept dates back to the 70s, okay, in its real roots. And a lot of sort of the management and government structures that we've had are no longer relevant, as you can imagine. So there's old ways of doing business, and you would think, I always like to say that small organizations can be a lot more agile. They can shift their resources quicker, you can change your rules and policies quicker, but people are not really as receptive to change as you may think. As far as Northampton, we're always looking at things that Amherst is doing and trying to sort of, one-up them quietly. We don't manage to. Our facility is quite a bit smaller. We have a citizen journalism program that and I really consider most of community media has always been citizen journalism to an extent, but a more formalized citizen journalism program We have a different web portal for it, so we're also going to be Paradise City Press, and starting to have some media summits in Western Massachusetts with interested entities who want to contribute and share content. I believe you asked about distribution as opposed to raising revenue, and so I think our model is really just getting as many connections as possible and worrying about monetization afterwards. And it's a really interesting shifting technological time, especially when you have Netflix becoming HBO and pulling off of the online market, right? So Netflix is 20% of internet traffic, but they've lost a lot of the people who are supplying with content, and their model is really to be a cable television station, okay? That's where they say they want to go. So it's interesting to see that kind of announcement. And the golden age of sort of that free content may be over, may be ending, because someone has to pay people to work, right? We all know that. And so it's a very interesting shifting field, and I wouldn't make any assumptions about it whatsoever. But we're going to see nationally, hopefully, some radical change. And I think broadly, I would say, and I can't speak for the entire organization, national organization, but the Telecom Act will be rewritten in the next couple of years. So a lot of these issues like cable television being the only revenue generator for a community center like this, that'll be one thing that's on the table. But it won't just be community media centers who are in that discussion. Of course, it's going to be Verizon, it's going to be Comcast. They're going to drive the discussion because they're driving the lobbyists. There are, and I wish I had a graphic of it, but there's one ACM, Alliance for Community lobbyist, for every 10,000, cable industry lobbyists. So it'll be an interesting discussion. But the strength is, and I'm going to wrap up because this is becoming a little soapbox, is really, I think the strength is that there's a physical community space and that it's hyperlocal. That's the difference of what a place like this can offer compared to any competing internet technology or economic model. If anyone has questions of me related to any of that, I'd be happy to field those.
We are coming up on the close of our program.
Well, we should all stay around and chat in smaller groups, I would say. And I think that one of the things I would suggest here is that with everything online, it's worth finding out all the people that you don't normally see, because when you're watching television, it's just what you click past at that point. If you go and discover and look through, and some of our producers in particular, Mr. Ron Nestor has been here for many years, is somebody I think that everybody should go and see Ron's work, so I just like to plug him at this point. But many of the others as well deserving your time, and hopefully you will be feeding back into this community in some way, whether you're inside this building or out. We wish you all the best of luck, and thank you very much for coming this evening.
Thank you so much, Craig.
Pleasure.
It's been a wonderful presentation. I'd also just like to acknowledge that we have another person from our from cable out in Turner's Falls. Owen, did you want to just introduce yourself? So if there's anybody here from that area?
Thanks for the sneak attack. Hi, my name is Owen Weaver. I worked at GCTV for a couple years. Now I'm over in Turner's and just digging out the VHS tapes. I'm trying to get into this century.
Could I add something really quick? We sort of ended, but as we were ending, I was thinking of something. You were specifically asking about speaking to the physical space, what you might be looking for. And just tagging on to what you said, I think it's so true in terms of meeting people and connecting people and networking, and that speaks to, getting things distributed and all of this. So much of it has to do with it's so funny because we're here talking about TV and online and this and that, and still face-to-face interaction is so often where things cement. You might email somebody that you don't know and say, hey, I think I can do something for you. You might be able to do something to me. Let's meet. But it's when you actually sit down for coffee or lunch or whatever. So maybe when you're thinking about the space, and you were mentioning one space is kind of boxier and taller and this sort of thing, maybe you should be thinking about the space and how conducive it is to physically network and be able to have a space that encourages that. Because, you know, if you have a physical space that's not going to be inviting or comfortable, then that's not going to happen. And I think that so much does happen when people physically get together in a room.
I agree.
And will we have an opportunity to get
Yeah.
a tour?
If any of you want to come around the building, we can certainly take you around and show you what we've done with this space, which is in some ways comfortable and welcoming, and in other ways we've done the best we can with. Just to make it-
So another round of applause for Jim and Craig. Thank you so much for hosting us.